Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. Religion plays a big role in individual lives and society. Religion impacts people's worldview and perceptions of policies, politics, ethics, and values. Today, we're going to talk about faith. My guests are Pastor Ray Ranker. He is a pastor and chaplain with the Lutheran Campus Ministry with the University of Maryland. And we are honored today to have Gloria Aparicio-Blackwell. She is the producer of the show and also our contributor, who has been on various times. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show. And Pastor Ray, I'm going to start with you because, you know, this last year has been tough. And the importance of faith, or the access of those of us who belong to a faith can help and can support us through these difficult times. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's great to be with you all here today. It's been a heck of a year. And so many, of course, have been touched, whether they got the virus themselves or family members, friends, aunts and uncles, et cetera, et cetera. It's just been one of the hardest years. And then, of course, you can't gather together in person and celebrate life and mourn and lament in the same ways that we have. It's been a real challenge for the faith community too. And I think certainly I come from the Christian tradition. Hope is a big part of our faith and belief in new life, not just an afterlife, which we believe in heaven, but also here and now, that that God's kingdom is present, but also not completely here yet. So to have a faith community, I think when times are good, everything's great. I can rely on my own wealth. I can rely on my own strength. It's a lot different when we have those times where it's out of our control. It reminds us that really, truly, life isn't in our control as much as we like to think it is sometimes. And I think for those, I won't speak for people of all faiths, but at least in my faith tradition, to know that there's a God who loves us, even in the midst of the biggest suffering that we might experience.
Have you really seen a lot of suffering or challenges for the students who are so young? They don't have a lot of life experience, and they've been confronted and faced with this very serious challenges regarding their education, life, finances. What have you seen the students do in the last year?
There are many students who maybe lost their first person who was close to them during the pandemic, maybe a grandparent, maybe a family member, maybe a friend. We actually had a student very active in our ministry who took their own life. And so anytime anybody loses somebody close to them, I mean, that's really hard, especially that first time. But it's also manifested itself in the terms of dreams and hopes that were not realized. You know, I have a student who was ready to study abroad in Germany, and, you know, that got canceled. She was looking, forward to that. How many internships, how many jobs were canceled? How many people, recent grads or students who rely on working to make an income, to pay their loans, to pay their rent? Those just couldn't happen in the same way, and people aren't going to get that junior year back of their lives. They're not going to get that sophomore year back. So I think it's been both what we've lost, but also the things that we hoped for that and planned on that we weren't able to realize.
What do you recommend or say to these young people that are faced with these challenges or new hurdles that were unexpected to cope? How do you use the faith to help them cope with these challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think first and foremost, we have to listen to them and not try to brush it away or say it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Like, these are people's lives. And so really to listen and to walk with them in that. I think lament is a great tool also. We can be sad about things. We can be angry about things. Sometimes there's this kind of myth that Christians have to be nice. You can't be angry. You can't, and I really don't see that. Jesus was angry at times. God is angry at times in our tradition, and even in the Bible, the Psalms, people are being real. So I think number one, first and foremost, let's be real and allow people to have those emotions. And maybe it goes back to hope, that it won't always be this way, and reflection on. I think this is also a really good time for people to kind of do some discerning about their lives and where they want to spend their time, where they want to spend their energy. We're seeing it in our workforce, of course, people realigning their priorities and thinking more about, is this the kind of job that I want to be in? Is this the kind of career I want to be in? And I think even for students, for all ages, it's a good and natural time to be doing some of that assessing.
Gloria, you and I have both been pretty active in policies and politics and you name it. That's how we met millions of years ago. But how do you see religion play a factor in our views and perceptions of policies and ethics and politics? What do you think?
Mariana, thank you once again. I'm glad to be here, and also with Pastor Ray, which is a great colleague at the university. And I'm going to tell you something. Religion is kind of a place for many people that's the guidance for them, for their thinking process, for how they act within their communities, and also the faith and the churches in this case kind of give them the guidance for them how to act, how to be part of a community. And I feel that is a tremendous power that we give religion at some point. If we are kind of having our own ideas, having our own facts that we can also compare with what we're hearing, and also what our role should be. So I feel, particularly this time when we're going through all these challenges that this virus has put in us, this pandemic has caused to all of us, that is another place for us to find those guidance, to hear other people. And unfortunately, it has to be all virtual at this moment, even though we're coming back. But it's difficult. So I think that at this moment, I believe that churches, faith, religion can play a bigger role in making humanity a little bit better. Right now we are in derail, and I hope that we can bring that this place can bring all of us together and to fighting for the common good. We can't, because that's what we see in the Bible, that we are to support each other, that we are to help each other, that we are to come together, that people that are in need, that we are part of bringing solutions. And right now, we have not seen that as a full potential. So we haven't get it to the full potential it could be. And I think religions at this moment could be another catalyst to help us to get out of this mess that we are in.
I think all of us put our faith in something. And I've had some great conversations with Brother Tarif, the Muslim chaplain and a good friend at University of Maryland. And oftentimes that's in the markets or money. Sometimes it's in politics and political parties. Sometimes it's in ourselves and my own strength, or my family, or a significant other, or education. I mean, there's so many opportunities out there, and people put faith in different things. And I think, especially during the pandemic, when some of those things that we did put faith into failed us, it's kind of maybe doing that kind of natural time to kind of rethink and re-examine. where we're putting our faith.
So right now I'm going through the redistricting process, being on the chair, and I noticed that we have reached out to many of the Protestant churches and synagogues, that they have been a really good conduit to share information with the congregations about participation in politics and the importance of being involved, and later on voting and that kind of thing. How do you guys see the role of religion in politics?
I'm going to tell you something in that regard, is that that's another place for us to get the information across. That's the trusted place for many individuals, and we can get to be working with it in partnership. You can provide information. We did it with COVID. We did it with the food distribution. We had done it with the vaccination. We had done it with census work that we had to do to count people. So they serve a tremendous place for us to disseminate good information. So that's the places that we need to partner with. And right now, with the encouraging people to vote, registering, they are being part of this. They have been part of this. Of course, there are other denominations that might be thinking something different, but the majority of the places that we try to look for is individuals that are ready to get the community involved.
There's this, I think there's this amazing sometimes hesitancy, and I would even say, yeah, almost maybe, I don't know, heresy sounds like a big word to use for something, but there's this fear that being involved in politics is somehow going to upset religion, and like, the church is not going to be political, the synagogue is not going to be political. I can say in the Christian faith tradition, Jesus was very political. When you talk about issues of poverty and wealth, that's politics. When you're talking about people's health care and their well-being, that's politics. If you're talking about who belongs, that's politics. I mean, what is politics except for the people? These are all things that are political in nature. I think the real challenge becomes when we become too partisan, when we focus on partisanship. Like there's one answer, and it's this political party or this politician, and that's where there's a real danger. But I think, and again, speaking from my tradition, it's important for the church to be involved in politics, to organize, to create change. I mean, if we boil down our Christian faith to what Jesus says, sum up the Bible. Okay, love God, love your neighbor. Of course, very hard to do those things, but that involves, an advocacy campaign for healthcare. That involves walking with people, marching with people, being in solidarity with people, and saying that Black Lives Matter or that immigrants' lives matters. I just got back from the border, from El Paso. We did a border immersion with students, and thankfully, this is the first time we got to do a trip in a year and a half. And we got to talk to a lot of people who have left their homes, not because they hate their homes, then I don't ever want to live in my home again. It's because there's violence. It's because there's hunger. It's because they're afraid. It's because they want a better life for their kids. And a lot of that is a result of our U.S. politics, our foreign policy in Central America.
Let me ask you, because you were just there. That is very recent. What are the conditions like on the border, on the U.S. side with all the people that are coming in and going through the immigration process?
It's really heartbreaking to hear the stories of what people are experiencing. Some of the stuff has been in the news, but There was certainly a surge of people coming, whether unaccompanied minors, whether families. Those are just an enormous number of people coming these days. Right now, the border is officially closed. It's Title 42 that's still in place right now, which means that people who want to claim asylum can't come to U.S. soil to do that. And so there's many who are, for instance, in El Paso, they're staying in Juarez. They can't come across right now and make those claims. They've traveled, very far. They're also at risk. We're hearing a lot that many of these really refugees are being abused. There's a lot of potential for, especially unaccompanied minors, especially young women, 15-year-old girls. It's not a safe environment for them in their homes and their home countries. It's not a safe environment for them at the borders.
If you can share one or two of the stories that you've heard that really impacted you.
Yeah, I heard from a young man, and this was, well, I say young because he was my age, but I don't know if I qualify as young anymore. But his story really impacted me because he's actually 3 days older than I am. I mean, our birthdays are that close together. And he showed me his scars. He has 16 scars on his body. The cartels killed his brother in his home country, and it just got too unbearable. They threatened him. They attacked him many times because he wasn't complying with their orders. And he came here, and he wasn't allowed to cross the border to claim asylum. And so what he did is he crossed. He used a coyote. He paid somebody to help him get across. He actually tripped and fell on his way, broke his leg in several pieces, and got left for dead. He didn't have any water, and the group kept going. He was found, thankfully, and it was in the hospital for 3 weeks. But he's in the asylum process now, and he has a credible fear. I mean, that's the thing. I think sometimes people don't realize our court systems here, whether you have a credible fear, they call it. And if the answer is no, then you're going to be sent back. So the people who are let into the country for months and years at a time, they're people who have real fears as deemed by a court. So that was one. I have, there was one family I got to know. They have a husband and wife and a 4-year-old or so. And they both, the father and the mother were threatened by, again, cartels. And to the point where sometimes the cartels will say something like, you need to pay me to make sure that nothing happens to your little girl, which of course is a threat. If you don't pay something is going to happen. And
those threats are super credible because that's how they're making their money is by extorting protection money from these families and people. And sometimes it doesn't matter if you pay, if they want to use you to make an example of others and such. How does, and this is for both of you, for you, Gloria, and for you, Pastor Ray, how does faith come into the conversation when we're talking about these human tragedies that, our politicians have to face? Because, I sometimes hear the argument that you have to weigh your ethics and your faith with the practicality of governing, and maybe they are not reconcilable. I mean, is that really the case, or is that a cop-out? And I guess by my question, you guys can tell where I land on that, but
it is
what do you guys think?
It is a very critical balance that you have to, but it's up to, I think it's the humanistic way that you were brought up, what values are in you that you're going to, because faith, if you see it in the way it is more about principles, the moral values, that the moral compass. respecting your neighbors, loving your neighbors, having, practicing and respecting laws and all of those things. So that's what it formed you to be a human and be part of a community. Things that start become a little bit tricky when you start playing politics. So there are good public servants, and I call them public servants because they're following what it can be done in order to preserve humanities in this case. And then there are the other ones that are pure just politicians. They're going to be utilizing the faith based on what it is convenient for them. But if it's not, that's when they start doing the tricky maneuvers. For example, we had to be creating the level of empathy. These people are not just coming because they just want to leave their home country to take advantage of the United States. They are leaving because there is conditions that others have imposed into these countries that therefore is impacting the livelihood of these individuals. And they have to look for the best for their families. And that's why they are coming here. And these politicians, because they are hearing what all these groups and also from the faith-based leaders sometimes will be following whatever that will bring vote that they're going to be going with that message. But if they are following their heart, their mind, their principles, perhaps we will be in better place today.
I have to say, I couldn't agree more, Gloria. And when I was at the border, I'm a very policy-minded person. I studied government and politics. I'm active and do advocacy. So I think immediately my questions are, how do we solve this problem? And we can't have open borders. That really wouldn't work, because then how would we support? And I realized that if that's our primary entry into things, it would be easy to miss Juan's story or Lino's story or Soledad's story. It would be easy to look past all these individuals who are suffering. And I think that's one aspect of faith, that we don't get to look past individuals. I think, again, from my faith perspective, that's one of the really awesome things. Jesus sees the Samaritan woman at the well. She's been outcasted because she's got 3 strikes. She's a woman, she's a foreigner, and she's been sexually, impure or whatever. And Jesus sees her and talks to her, and that's, I think then having that shift to see the people and then ask the questions out of that experience. This is what's happening. Nobody should experience these things. What do we need to do in order to be a more loving neighbor? And
that is a really challenging question, because there's so many special interests. There are interests that are driven by economics. There are factors that make this conversation uncomfortable for some and not for others. And yet it's an issue that we cannot overcome and have not overcome through more than just one presidency. We can't blame this on any one president.
Yeah. But look at the safe havens practices in cities and all of that. When you say that immigration, that if you start looking, if you police, for your local police, stop an individual, that they can not ask for the immigration status, because that's not a requirement, or B, you would want it to be I'm going to be asking now for that, so that it will create a situation for a family, for an individual. So these are they have jurisdictions here that have decided this is going to be a safe haven. We're not going to be asking for this particular the particular immigration status. And also for churches, to someone have a baby and they don't want to keep the baby, they can leave it in a hospital, at the church, with no repercussions. So those are alternatives that we have taken in place. And those are the kind of things that we have to be thinking about. How could we go about and provide that at least is going to be protecting our communities? At the same time, we are providing a refugee space for those individuals that really need it. So that's something that we need to be thinking about. And it would be so strict with the law. Of course, we need to be asking for immigration in some instances, but that decision, you have to be making decisions. Is it important? Is that critical? Is that something that really drive to do that step?
I think that's an excellent point. And you've got 30 seconds, Pastor Ray, before we got to go out.
Well, I was just going to say that these are difficult questions and they're hard answers. And as faith communities, we can't use that as an excuse to not be engaged and involved. We might not all end up agreeing exactly what it needs, how we look more like a loving our neighbors, but we need to be engaging it and push that's where we need to go. It'll be hard to find consensus, but that's what it needs to be.
Very well said. And thank you guys so much for being on the show. And, you know, it's hard to talk about religion. So it's nice to be able to share this with our audience. I'd like to thank the audience for watching the show. We are on Facebook, we are on YouTube and Instagram. Look for us, and we'll catch you next time.